This is a better way. So, hi guys, welcome to today's episode of the podcast. And how long does it really take to change a behavior? If this question has ever popped up in your mind, or you've ever been curious about this, or you know anyone that has really struggled with any kind of addiction or any kind of behavior change, I think this would be a good time to just share this podcast with them or just tell them about it. And I'm so sure that it will be very valuable to them. So, hello and welcome back to A Better Way. I'm so glad that you can join me today. So, let me begin with the question, really, right? So maybe you've tried to quit smoking, or you started, waking up early, or maybe you've promised yourself that you're going to stop scrolling endlessly on your phone at night. And, somewhere along the line, you might have heard that it will only take you about just, 21 days to change a habit. That sounds neat, right? There are 3 short weeks and, you're a whole new person, brand new, voila, right? But if you've actually tried to change something important in your life, like I have, you would already know that it really works out that way, right? Change is really tidy and it really can be frustrating. It can be slow. Sometimes it can even feel like 2 steps forward and 3 steps backward. So, today, what I'm going to really be focusing on is to unpack this question, and we'll explore, is it really a myth that we can change in 21 days, or is it really, really true? We'll look at what exactly are some of the neuroscience backed research, and where exactly did this whole 21 days thing come from, right? And how does behavior and habit really change? How does the brain form new neural pathways, and why does it sometimes feel so hard to change behavior, right? We'll talk about some of the behaviors that, may take longer than others. And I will really share some practical insights into how you can make change really, really stick. Let's jump right into it, shall we? So you've probably heard the phrase, right? It takes 21 days to change a habit. It's catchy. It's simple. It's very, very easy, but sometimes it can really feel untrue because you have tried it. You've tried to quit smoking. You've tried to quit watching pornography. You've tried to quit doom scrolling. You've tried all manner of things. But then it seems like, man, this thing ain't working. And, everyone is just trying to take my money with all of those, quick products and all of that. And I'm not here today to really throw shades at any product, but I'm just here to dig deep like I always like to do. I'm very, very concerned about going deep and exploring and using questions and research and engagement to really, really expand our awareness. So it all started in the 1960s, really, right? And a particular name is very consistent, and it is Dr. Maxwell Maltz. Now, he noticed really, right, that after performing plastic surgery, like, maybe removing a patient's maybe lump in the nose, or maybe amputating a limb, or probably just, a plastic surgery, he noticed that it takes an average of about 3 weeks for a patient to adjust to their new appearance, or to begin to adjust in their lives, right? So, in his research around psychocybernetics, right, he says that it takes people an average of about 21 days, really, right, to get used to change. Now, that was his idea, right? And he published it in that research, and you can go find that research and read it, right? But then here's the twist. He wasn't talking about habits at all. He wasn't referring to the fact that, this is applicable when you're changing habit. He was only talking about adapting to physical change, right? Because he's a plastic surgeon, right? Like, he was talking about physical change. But over time, right, his observation turned into, a universal sensation. And, it became a very catchphrase or a hook for people who were trying to sell products. And, what you typically hear all the time is that, oh, it takes about 21 days to change any habits. The self help industry took it, ran with it, and started to galvanize people around that idea. But one of the things that has now been seen to be true significantly is that a lot of people get disappointed when it's 3 weeks. You told me I'm going to change, but I'm not changing, right? And I, for one, as a psychotherapist and someone who's very enthusiastic about human behavior and social behavior, I know for a fact that human beings are a lot more complex, and that for a fact, it does not really take 21 days. It takes much longer. And that's where science helps us to understand this thing a lot more, right? You know, and this is where I want to focus on today in the podcast. So let's step into the brain for a moment, shall we? Changing a habit isn't just about willpower or self discipline. I know you've tried all of those things, really, right? But it's much more beyond that. It's really about wiring new patterns in your nervous system. What happens, you know, aren't you curious? I am, right? Like, what happens? And this has been something that I have always been very excited about. So I'm someone who struggled with habit as well and has, changed from that habit. And that's where I saw from my personal experience and the privilege of having also helped other people change behavior. I've seen that when you practice a new behavior, say for example, choosing water instead of a soda, right? Your brain fires neuron in a specific pattern. At first, those signals are weak and scattered. It's like walking through a grass where there is no path, right? But each time you repeat that behavior, the neurons fire again and the path gets clearer. Eventually, it becomes a clear trail. Now, if you think about maybe that bush path or that grass path in your area or somewhere that and there's this footpath somewhere around there, the first question you want to ask yourself is, who was the first person that took a walk on this path? And when the person took that walk, was there a path existing there? The true answer really is no. There's a popular saying in the corridors of neuroscience that, cells that fire together wire together. And this is where repetition becomes an important value or an important concept in changing behavior. Now, specifically in 2019, a research in the University of East London, led to ask how long does it actually take for us to really, really change behavior? And on average, the answer came to about 66 days. So, which means that for you to really change your behavior, the minimum is actually between 2 months to 2.5 months. That's more than, like 2 months of consistent repetition of a behavior before it starts to become automatic. And now here is the catch. Your brain, however, is capable of changing. And this is the beauty of where neuroplasticity comes to play. But the important thing to note is that it doesn't really happen overnight. It takes consistent practice. Most importantly, patience and time, really, right? For those neurons to strengthen. Think about that grass and that pathway for every time I talk about the neurons and the pathway, right? The more you take that walkway, the more you take that path, the more it becomes a path, the more it solidifies. And that's really what this is all about. So let's really be honest. Some behaviors can feel very, very, very easy to change, while some can really feel very hard, right? Think about the difference between, deciding to drink a glass of water every morning versus deciding to quit smoking. Obviously, they are not the same thing. Both are habits, quite all right, but they do not carry the same weight. Now, the question is, why? And here's the answer: complexity, complexity, complexity. Now, small, simple habits like, a glass of water are quicker because They do not demand, major emotional or environmental shifts, but something bigger like changing your entire diet, changing your lifestyle, breaking free from pornography or an addiction or smoking or whatever takes more time. Why? Because it involves multiple layers of behavior. Multiple layers of behavior. Secondly, there's an emotional weight involved. Habits tied to comfort, trauma, or identity are harder to entangle. Now, take for example, you know, overeating may not just be about food, it could be about, soothing yourself, it could be about consoling and comforting yourself. Smoking may not necessarily just be about, nicotine. It could be about belonging with your friends, or just necessarily belonging in a particular club or community or being perceived a certain way. Now, these habits will take longer to shift. Why? Because they are deeply entrenched, they are deeply buried into who we are and how we cope. Now, one of the things that I have always emphasized in behavior change or habit change is that don't focus on the habits. First, identify what need is that habit fulfilling. Once you are able to identify the need that that habit is fulfilling, then you can start the journey of recovery. Another important thing is that there's an environment element to it, which is that imagine that you're trying to cut down, maybe for example, on excess intake of alcohol, right? Why spending every evening at the bar with your friends and they all drink, or you're trying to maybe build a morning routine, right? You're going for a long run or a long walk, but you're living in a very noisy, chaotic environment. Your environment plays a significant role in supporting your change or sabotaging it. I've taught you that emotional, you know, I've, I've taught you that significant emotional experience, upbringing, environment, right, play critical roles in shaping who you are. Now, this is a classic example of it, really, right? So, the roles of reward is another thing. I highlighted it earlier and I said, do not focus on the habit. First, identify what need is this habit fulfilling? What exactly is, because I've seen a lot of time people throw, stones at, people who are addicts, maybe drug addicts or addicted to one thing or the other. And they're like, okay, this person cannot just stop. No, this person cannot just stop. Why? Because there's a reward element to it. Our brains are wired to repeat behaviors that really give us what is called the dopamine spike, a feel good chemical. So, if a habit that has an immediate reward, like quick comfort, sugar, whatever it is, right, is involved, best believe that you cannot just walk away from it. It's not just going to be a fly on the wall. It will require systematic intervention, which I'm also going to talk about in the course of today's episode, really, right? So now let's look at the psychological side of this whole thing, because when we talk about it, the question is, what exactly are the stages of change? How does change really, really happen? People don't just flip a switch. You don't just it's not just a button, like maybe you enter into your bedroom and you switch on the light and you switch it off. There's a process of activating that behavior, and there's also a process of deactivating that behavior. And now the deactivating of that behavior is really what I want to focus on right now. First, there is the pre-contemplation part. Now, right? You're thinking about change. And now this I'm talking about the steps of change. You've come to a point where you are beginning to consider change. I always say you are not ready for change until you have hit rock bottom. The first point of creating change is that you must have gotten to a point, and rock bottom means different things for different people. Rock bottom doesn't mean that you're sitting in a bathtub, somewhere in a hotel and you have maybe a suicide note already written and you're about to maybe take a drug that will take your life or something. That necessarily isn't rock bottom. Rock bottom could be that you just sit down somewhere and you're thinking about how this behavior has robbed you of all the valuable opportunities, the impact it has had on your family members, your loved ones, and the rest of them. Now, this is called the pre-contemplation stage. This is where you are really, really thinking about change. Now, the next phase is really the preparation. Now you start to plan. What can I do? What do I have to do? Where do I start from? What can I stop? What can I put in place? And then the next thing is to really take actions. You begin to create a new behavior. Now, there is no vacuum. As far as your self is concerned, as far as your mind is concerned, there's no such thing as a vacuum. A current behavior must be replaced with a new behavior. And now that brings me to the final thing, which is maintenance, right? You must work to keep it up. Work to keep it up has to do with continuously creating boundaries around this old behavior and consistently reinforcing this new behavior. And I'm going to dive right into it. So, here's what important thing that I'd like to really state before we go ahead. And because I'm not really here to give you quick fixes, right? Or to give you fast food solutions or talk about things that are just going to just be a flip on the switch. No, we're not talking ditch all those 21 days cookbook things. That's not what I'm talking about. Yes, come for me, I said so. I'll be waiting for you, right? Now, one important thing I'd like to really re-emphasize, and I think this is at the heart of behavior change and recovery, and this is really where a lot of people who are recovering really miss it. Relapse is part of this process. I'll say that again. Relapse is part of this process. Now, every time you slip back into an old pattern, it doesn't mean that you have failed. It just means that you're learning. Each time you try again, you strengthen that neural firing just a little more. You strengthen it just a little more. So, this is why patience is very important and self-compassion. There's something I teach my clients in therapy, and it's to repeat these words and say, I forgive myself for everything that I have done wrong, for every time I have expected myself to be at best behavior, but I have failed. I forgive myself. I deeply and compassionately love you. Now, these words, as simple as they are, they reinforce unconditional acceptance of the self. Because there's nobody that is much more a critic than yourself. Because there are deep-seated secrets that absolutely nobody knows about you, but that you know about yourself. And this is why a lot of people really struggle with imposter syndrome, because they know themselves all too well, much more than any other person does, right? So, it's really very important. And success, and I mean real success, isn't about how fast you can really break away from a habit. It is whether or not you can keep living differently over time. It's not really about, oh, you want to prove a point. It's really about, over a period of time, how has your life changed? How has your life pattern changed? How has your decisions changed? That is really where success lies. So, here are a few strategies that I would like to share. And the first thing is start small. You know, don't aim for the mountain, aim for the little things. If your goal is to exercise, just start with 2 push-ups. If your goal is to eat healthier, just start with adding 1 vegetable to your plate. If your goal is to quit pornography, just start by not watching for an hour a day or for a couple of hours a day, right? Aim for small things. I know this sounds quite counterproductive or whatever, but this is behavior change that we're talking about. And remember, you are creating a new neural pathway. It's like building a house. You don't just go overnight, boom, and then the house is standing, right? Chances are that you'll be very suspicious. Was this house really built well? Think about it that way. The next thing really is consistency. And the interesting thing is that consistency beats intensity when it comes to habit change. Consistently build that habit. It is better to repeat something small every day than to go all out once and crash, because your neurons need to repeatedly fire in order for them to wire. Do you see what I did there? Yes, your neurons need to repeatedly fire in order for them to clock in. And once they clock in, it's like they are locked in, and it continues that way. Then the next thing I want to refer to is what I call habit stacking. And now, really, what exactly is habit stacking? It is attaching your new habit to something you already do. Attaching your new habit to something that you already do. Take, for example, after I brush my teeth, I will meditate for 1 minute. Take, for example, if meditation is part of your daily routine, if no sorry brushing your teeth is part of your daily routine, right, and your goal is to meditate, so what you tell yourself is, after I finish brushing my teeth, I will meditate, right? So if you are maybe planning to exercise more, you can tell yourself, after I have woken up, done my morning routine, I will head to the gym. Or after I have spoken to this person, I will head to the gym, right? Or you're trying to choose a different behavior, you can say, by the time it is late, or whenever I am alone in a hotel, right? Um, and there is nobody here with me, I will call after I have finished taking my bath at night and I feel fresh, I'm in a state of comfort. Instead of going to take a smoke, I will, after I finish taking my bath, I will call so and so person. After I have finished maybe eating dinner, I will read a book. So that's what habit stacking does. What it does is that it prepares you ahead of time. One of the things I have seen that causes people to find it very difficult to break habits is that they do not prepare for when the habit shows up. The habit shows up, there's already an automatic system in your brain, and it's just. Now, the last but definitely not the least is really social support. And, you know, social support is really very important because change isn't really easy without a community. Share your goal with someone that you trust, a friend. You could engage the services of a therapist or whatever, or join a support group, right? Or anybody. But having someone that can help you stay accountable to some of the things that you've set, some of the boundaries and the systems and the goals that you have set, can really, really, really go a long way to helping you, right? So, more often than not, it looks like, it takes a longer time. It takes like forever, right? But every day you repeat that new behavior is not a waste. You continue to strengthen that neural pathway, and you are literally, and I mean it, literally reshaping your brain. Your neurons are rewiring, and they are creating a stronger pathway for you. So the question, at the end of the day, shouldn't really be how long will it take, but how willing am I to walk the path of creating a new behavior one step at a time until this particular bush path, grass path becomes an entire walkway. Now, if you're dealing with complex behaviors or addiction like, drugs or nicotine or pornography, it can feel very overwhelming to want to do this all by yourself. And that's the reason why rehabs exist. That is the reason why therapy, AA groups are very important. And as I come to the end of this episode, if you are struggling with any of these behavior that is associated with some of the things I've mentioned earlier, such as reward, emotions and environment, it's really very important that you put structured systems such as therapy, a formal support group, because in all of these contexts, there are exercises, there are habit trackers, and a couple of other resourceful tools that can be very helpful for you. So if you like, to have someone walk this journey of recovery with you, please feel free to reach out to me through any of my social media handles, or just even drop me an anonymous comment and say, we need to talk. I'm more than happy to reach out to you through my team, and then let us begin this journey of recovery with you. As always, be kind to yourself, and you know that I'm rooting for you. Cheers.